You're listening to Get Tilted, only on Fantasy Now Plus.
I'm Brian, your host, alongside me as always, Tim Halstad. We just cannot believe some of these prices. And
I did a double take when I saw that DraftKings had already released their week one pricing. And there's a lot of interesting prices up and down the board at every position. We're going to obviously give our initial thoughts. We don't know who's healthy at this point. We don't know the positions. We don't know the depth charts for some of these players, but we can give our initial thoughts.
Here we are, the DFS screen. Cannot be more happy to see you again. Lovely, lovely roster construction screen. Now, there's so already off the bat, there are so many games that are both interesting and yet are going to just be like hyper chalk. And the first one I really want to bring up, which I think everyone's going to want a piece of, is this Buccaneers Bengals game.
Yeah.
An over under of 51, I believe. Let me just double check the note here that I made for myself. Over under 51 and a half, with the Bengals being favored at home. But like the prices reflect the amount of points that are going to be made in this game. So Joe Burrow's the second most expensive QB on the slate. Baker Mayfield, though the dog here, 5,900, I think a lot of people will be very excited about to click his name. So be careful diving into this one. I feel like that's going to be very, very common QB paired up with probably either Ibuka or Chris Godwin.
You know, like we said at the top, this is the softest pricing is going to be all year for DraftKings. So, you know, as we go through the positions, I don't think anyone's over $8,000 right now. And I think it's Jamar Chase. It's $8,000, if I remember correctly. Might be a running back, actually. There's a lot of salary to play with this week. And I'd say if there's any week where you just ignore everything we just talked about, like this is probably the closest that's going to be, because you can just kind of build super teams based on the way that you think a lot of teams are going to perform this season, based on how you think certain players are going to play. And we'll get into some of those plays for sure. It's a little early, but we'll still do a little bit of forecasting on some of these guys. But like if you scroll down in the quarterback tab, like we're looking at Bryce Young against an already very banged up Bears secondary at 5,200. Like that feels fine. Jacoby Brissett against the Chargers, like whichever of the Raiders quarterbacks is starting is facing the Dolphins at a stone 5K. Geno Smith is like priced lower than Anthony Richardson for some reason. Like, and he's facing the Titans. Like, I feel like Geno Smith is just going to be chalk by the time we get to week one, assuming everything stays the same, because like we don't think that defense is particularly good. We think that offense could take a step forward. And even if he doesn't like smash, like 4,800 at quarterback on the softest pricing of everything, like you could basically just take great players at almost every other position and just be done. So
this game, I think, is going to be awesome. Like you said, I don't want to dive into too much, but this Tennessee Titans game, I'm circling with a big old highlighter. There's going to be plenty of just like low-cost guys that are probably worthwhile to roster. Yeah. I should probably wait on something like this, but I'm going to make a lineup of at least like a Cam Ward, Carnell Tate stack, because I think it's going to be a weird game, and I kind of want pieces in it.
It's a Robert Saleh revenge game right off the bat. Like,
beautiful.
It's you know, like you look at the top of the pricing and you're like, oh, Lamar Jackson's only 6,800, and you're like, that seems too cheap. I want that, and that's fine. Like, Indy could be a good matchup for them, but like, is he really going to, in the first game with a new offensive coordinator that he's had in what, a decade, basically his whole career at this point? Like, will he explode? He could, but like, is it likely in the first game with a new offense? Probably not. Like, he's probably gonna be fine. You need him to rush for 100 yards. Like, are we expecting that? I'm not, personally. It's possible.
And then right below it, you know, we're splitting hairs. Jalen Hurts and Jane Daniels in the same game, but they're both $200 to $300 cheaper, and they're both just as electric QB options. Like, this is when we're already thinking, like, how do we get the tiniest little bit of advantage as we're going through the rosters?
Everyone and their mother's going to pick Justin Herbert. They're like, oh, Cardinals bad.
That's going to be a fun one to at least get some early Herbert and QJ stacks.
So, yeah, I think quarterback on a first glance, I don't think you should pay up for quarterback in week 1. I just don't. There's a lot of good pricing down here, and there's a lot of very good pricing elsewhere. And like maybe you build one lineup, but like when's the last time that you remember like a quarterback just absolutely exploding in week 1? You know, like
funny enough, well,
Peyton Manning.
I was gonna say, I mean, it wasn't nearly exploding, but Geno Smith had a pretty good week 1 last year. If I remember correctly, they beat up on the Patriots of all things.
Yeah, like the only time their offense functioned all season was like one of Brock Bowers' best games. Trey Tuckered himself somehow. Like, yeah, it was weird. Like most things that happen in week 1 is just like offenses don't pass quite as much because they're just kind of like settling into the system and they're settling into what they need to do. And so it's very run heavy. It's very conservative. Like no one comes out guns blazing. Like especially teams like the Bengals, like they're famously just like, yeah, they start slow. I don't want to pay for Joe Burrow at 6,900, regardless of how juicy the matchup is on paper. Like, I just don't. Because again, that means that he has to have multiple pass catchers go off for a very large games right from the jump. Are they really going to have him dropping back to pass 45, 50, 55 times week 1? I don't think so. And if they are, something went really wrong.
And that means you probably wanted to have Baker because that means the Bucks are probably in that game and you could have had someone for a whole $1,000 cheaper. All right, let's look at the running back group here. Gibbs opening the slate at the highest at 8,000, Bijan 7,700, Jonathan Taylor and James Cook at 73 and 72, and Chase Brown, Devon Achane are the last of the 7K options. This one's, again, I don't know, for a running back, it's kind of like shoot your shot. As I mean, the Gibbs and Bijan pricing is both reasonable because it's probably only going to go up if they have good games.
I think the first price I want to point out is Ashton Genty at 6,600 facing the Miami Dolphins. Their defense is going to be awful. Like, there's very few things that we can kind of be certain about in fantasy. The Dolphins being bad is pretty high up on that confidence list. Like, they are bereft of talent. They are completely rebuilding. Their coach is probably gone after 1 season. Like, regardless of the fact that he's a defensive coach, like their wide receiver 1 is Tutu Atwell. The Raiders are, if Clint Kubiak is anything like we believe he is, the Raiders are going to do whatever the heck they want with this Dolphins defense. You know, if you just put this into like fantasy football, best ball terms, Ashton Genty's a first-round pick in best ball and in most fantasy drafts. Like, he's like the poster child of like, he's going to take the year 2 jump. He's going to get the year 2 workload. He's going to become the next Bijan Robinson. I tend to agree with that sentiment. There's certainly reasons to say that could not happen, but at 6,600 against the worst projected defense in football, I'm happy to fail on that. Like, I'm happy to just lose on that. I don't care how much, like, if he's like 90% chalk, then fade him. But like in week 1, it's very unlikely that he gets to that kind of ownership. Like, even at like 50% ownership, I'm pretty interested. It's hard to see how it fails, to be honest with you.
With everything that we've known about the Raiders, I completely agree. Like, Genty heading into year 2 should be great. Dolphins, tragic. This is a price that I think it's going to be very, very hard not to click. With a lot of these folks, like, you know, you can kind of see some of the pricing reflecting a little bit of hesitancy. Travis Etienne Jr. Only at 5,900.
Yeah,
there's a little concern with like Alvin Kamara. Like, how is that Saints offense going to run? This does seem pretty tempting to click. Same thing with a couple guys like Bashaw Tootin, Bucky Irving. They, again, who knows how much of the main work they're going to get.
Yeah.
We're projecting them to get a ton, or I should say, I think that they're going to get a bulk of the work. And these prices seem pretty good, but they're definitely more hesitant. And they'll probably increase as the weeks go on.
You know, going off of this, and then you look at the cheap list, and everything's a question mark. I don't want to play a question mark for 5,200. Even someone like Quinshon Judkins, like they're facing the Jaguars, which is like a top 3 rushing defense from last season. Like, and the Browns offense is going to be putrid, most likely. Like, even if he's getting all the workload, like, do I really want to spend down, quote unquote, to 5,500 for Judkins, or do I want to play which Washington running back's going to get the touches? Do I want to play which Minnesota running back's going to get the touches? Do I want to play Chicago? Which running back's going to get the touches? The Titans? Like, I don't want to play these games. Like, I'd rather just pay up. I really would. I'd rather just go get Saquon and Jonathan Taylor and Genty and, you know, even like James Cook against the Texans is like decently contrarian because everyone's just going to be like, oh God, the Texans defense. And it's like, yeah, but James Cook kind of just didn't care. Like, they just fed the ever-loving crap out of the ball to him every week, regardless of what the defense game plan was. So, like, I immediately see that as like, yeah, no one's going to pick James Cook. That'd be a great pick because everyone's going to be like, let's go get Amari and Hampton against the Cardinals. Let's go get Saquon against the Commanders. Like, everyone from like 6,500 and up, I think, is a great click. And everyone below that, I think, is probably not that great. Like, maybe 1 or 2 of them hits, but like, you have to guess.
In week 1, I don't know. What, you don't need to do that. We're all trying to figure out what is real in this NFL in the very early season. Like, it's easier for you and kind of, I'll say, less of a tax on your brain to try to wrap your head around the story of, I think Bill Krosky-Merritt is going to somehow like gash this Phillies defense. I don't think you need to do that for yourself. Just take Chase Brown. Like, it's okay. We'll figure out the pricing later. But right now, just take it easy on yourself and just pay up for a couple running backs that you can set and forget.
Yep.
For wideouts, no 8K wideout. Jamar Chase just underneath at 7,800. Amon-Ra St. Brown 7,500. Justin Jefferson 73. Nico Collins at 7 flat. And the rest are relatively cheap, if not, you can find value here. And this is where I think a lot of folks can make or break their first slate. Like, there's a ton. Quentin Johnson's 4,700, Jalen Coker 4,600, Jaden Higgins 4,500, Denzel Boston 4,400. Like, these are players that are perfect for DFS because you don't need to rely on them every week. You can just say, all right, I think this is a good matchup. Like, he's a 50-50 ball guy. Like, let's go get it. Josh Downs 5,200, Roma Dunze 5,400. Like this
Parker Washington's 5,600. Like, Terry McLaurin's 57. Garrett Wilson is 58 for some reason. Lad McConkey's 59. Like, to be honest, I don't think you need to pay up for a Jamar Chase or an Amon-Ra or Jefferson. You can, but like, I'd be totally happy running out the last 3 names I mentioned. And then, like, in the flex will be a wide receiver 2 or 3 that I'm stacking with whatever quarterback I pick. And that's that. Like, you've got all your savings. You can pay up for Gibbs and Bijan if you want, or Gibbs and Genty, or you can shoot for a running back in the flex and try and get all 3. Like, if you really like those 3 in particular, or whatever running backs you want, like, you can just pick 3 wide receivers in the 6 to 4K range. It's going to do really well, I think. Like, obviously you have to pick the right ones, but that's DFS in general. You have to pick the right ones, but like, there's a lot of really cheap, really good options here. If you think the Luther Burden breakout happens immediately, like, he's 5,500, like, he's tied for the most expensive bear, but still, like, again, if you think Michael Wilson's actually the truth, he's 5,300. Like, there's so much value to be had. Michael Pittman Jr.'s 49. Matthew Golden, if you think he's now the dude, he's 47 against the Vikings. Like, that's contrarian. You know, if you believe that some of these cheap rookies are going to break out, Omar Cooper Jr.'s 4,100. Like, we're not even sub 4K, and we've got first round picks in their first ever game. Like, there's good options here. There really is. And like, a lot of these matchups are good.
We could legitimately have an hour-long episode, I think, on this wide receiver pricing.
We probably will.
So, no. So I'm going to pause us and keep it for then, because the tight ends, the breakouts last year, truly, I think this was like the breakout position that people were just double stacking tight end because you had options between Bowers and McBride and Loveland if you really felt so inclined. Like, Warren had some really cheap weeks to start off this year. It really is the big two, and then really reasonable prices down the list. I think you can kind of, again, start, wow, some of the Stone Min, like, there's a lot of good stuff here, and I think you can really take advantage of, you know, this grouping here. I think the Fannin, Goddard, Chig, Andrews, and Sadiq, like, I think you can really get some value, like, lineups going.
Yeah. There's been a lot of really positive talk about Chigakonkwo and camp. Like, if they don't sign a Stephon Diggs or a Keenan Allen, like, he's their wide receiver too, most likely. He's at tight end. He's 4K. You've got Harold Fannin at 42. I think that's a really good price. You've got Kate Otten against the worst defense against tight ends in NFL history from last year. Like, in a game that's, you know, if you want a piece of that game that no one else is really going to play, pick Kate Otten because he's cheap and he's facing a defense that can't cover tight ends. And I sincerely doubt that they fixed that entirely in one draft and one offseason. Like, maybe it's better, but it's certainly not going to be the best, or like probably not even top half. Like, I'm sure a game plan that will be thrown around by the Bucs going into week one is like, hey, let's see if this still sucks. Let's target Ott 4 or 5 times in the first half and see if he gets 60, 70 yards and a touchdown off of this, and see if this is still exploitable or not. Like, I could see that. You know, you're looking farther down. You've got Greg Dulcich. It sounds like he's probably just going to be like the main passing target on the Dolphins offense, at least to start out with. Their wide receiver core is awful. Dalton Schultz is always fine. Pat Freiermuth, you and I take a lot. Like, TJ Hawkinson is still the starting tight end for the Vikings. Gunnar Helm is very reasonably priced against a Jets defense that is probably still bad. Like, you can get very cheap here. You can double up on them. I probably wouldn't double up this week, but you can. Like, if you really want to get contrarian and you think you have 2 very strong plays at cost, like, build a lineup with it. It's going to be rare because this is, of all weeks, this is the week where most people won't do it and won't feel like they have to do it. So if you think you can get away with it, like, go for it. The mid-level tight end is the strongest it's ever been, at least on paper. And like, whether that plays out or not over time remains to be seen. But you look at basically every tight end on this list and you're just like, yeah, that price makes sense. That's a good price. Like, even Bowers and McBride, like, if you're projecting them like wide receiver ones, they're priced cheaper than wide receiver ones. They're cheaper than Nico Collins.
Yeah, the Brock Bowers price, I may have to click a few times, especially since we just talked about how that matchup is so juicy for the Vegas Raiders. Truly, you know, last point I'll make, I think this is probably the cheapest we'll see about a few of these tight ends, as namely Tucker Kraft, namely Harold Fannin. You know, I don't care who's playing quarterback for the Browns. I think he's going to end up being this PPR monster who can probably slot in each and every week. Lastly, defenses, we'll just look at it just real quick, because who knows? Who truly knows? We can kind of make a relative assumption like, hey, I think the Titans can beat up on the Jets, maybe just because it's Geno Smith. But, you know, again, chaos is something that will always happen to the New York Jets. They might just have a huge game.
Yeah.
But Houston, you know, they would normally be pretty tempting, but against Buffalo, not so much.
But they're also Houston. So it's like, which do you think is better? The Bills' offense, which is a bunch of slot receivers and James Cook and Josh Allen, or the probably best on paper defense in football. You know, that's how you get contrarian. Something else that was brought up in the video that we didn't really touch on was home favored defenses are still like the best pick for defenses, but the actual pricing, interestingly enough, was not like always go stone min. It was like, hey, you can spend up for defense, that's fine. Like, so like last year when the Seahawks were crushing every single week, like you should have played them. Like, obviously we knew that in hindsight, but like when they were at home and they were favored, like you should just play them if they're a good pick. And like you can find other players to fit around the defense, but like some defense is just cast off as like this position that doesn't matter and you just need to pick whoever. And that might not really be the case at this point. Like there are obvious situations where you probably should pick the chalk defense because it's probably the best pick.
And in this week, I think you just go with your gut. Do you think that team's really good in defense? Sure. Do you think that team's really bad on offense? Pick that defense. There's just simply not enough data for any of these defenses at this point to make like a really accurate pick. So picking a home team, picking a team, maybe a game with a lower over-under, maybe that'll help you out.
Yeah.
But
I mean, Jaguars and Raiders immediately stand out. Like Jaguars facing the Browns, Jaguars at home, Raiders facing the Dolphins, Raiders at home. Like this, they're probably just good picks.
And that's, I think, what's going to do it for us for looking at the DFS slate. Don't want to go too long, and really, we have so much more to talk about later when we get closer to the season. Yeah. But we have our first set of prices. We can now start really game theorying our way to week one. And, you know, I'm sure there'll be plenty of rosters built, deleted, adjusted before we get to week one. That's going to do it for us on this episode of Get Tilted. Thanks so much for hanging out. Again, I'm Brian Rockwood, alongside me, Tim Halstad. And we will see you again when we get closer to week one. Be on the lookout for various videos we're going to come out later. We're going to hopefully do some game-by-game breakdown. And you'll see us there when you hit the bell icon down below and you subscribe. So thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe wherever you watch or listen to podcasts. We'll be back next week for more ways to win your league.